All right, guys, welcome to Get to Know Your Olympus Educators. My name is Lee Hoy, and we've got a panel, as you might see there on your screen, with some images. Nothing like technical people having technical issues. So some people you may hear, some you may see, some you may hear and see for a while, and then some may disappear. So unfortunately, we've had a couple with slower internet that aren't able to join us this evening, but we think that over the next, I believe, hour and a half, you're going to get a chance to get to know as many of the Olympus educators as technology will allow. So my name is Lee Hoy, and I'm going to walk you through and introduce you to each of our Olympus educators. There's 19 different ones. Not all are able to be with us tonight. We all have different photography genres, specialties, skills, what we do. And we want to do this workshop because I think, particularly if you're an Olympus shooter, and if you're not, we know you soon will be, but we think that you will benefit by getting to know these individuals, because I've only known them for about a month and a half, and there are some amazing photographers, some awesome personalities. We've been getting together once a week, having a blast. And if you get a chance so far to go on a workshop, to have your image taken by any of these photographers, you'll be making a great decision. I've been having a ball getting to know them, and I know you will too. So having said that, I'm going to switch our screen now from our mugs. Although some of them look actually really good tonight compared to what we normally look like. I want to show you some of their pictures, and I am going to introduce you to some of their work, and then they're going to introduce and tell you a little bit. Whoops. Well, of course, our slide starts right at the wrong one beginning, so Jamie's not going to start there. But these images, we've got 4 from each photographer, even from some who couldn't be here tonight. So I want to start with Tom and Lisa. Now, they've been having some challenges tonight, and so while their images are up, we're going to see if they can speak to the microphone. You have a chat on the right, and there's a Q&A, and Rob and some of the other photographers are going to keep an eye on that. So if we get some good questions, we hope you'll be willing to submit those as well. But Lisa, Tom, why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Hi, so we are here. Yes, thank you for joining us tonight. This first picture that's up kind of shows why we jumped to Olympus is because of the live composite technology. For those of you that are using that technology with your Olympus cameras, you know that it's almost magical. Like you can actually see your image in the dark night develop. You see the histogram move, you see the light come in, and when we saw that, it was like literally magical to us, and we were like, wow, we got to investigate this. And it was just something that we do a lot of night photography, we do a lot of light painting, and it was the main reason that we decided to go on to and be part of the Olympus family here.
This is a shot we took out in Nevada. I love this shot. I worked it for about 20 minutes. Again, like Lisa said, this is one of the reasons why we like our Olympus. I was able to start at the way in the back and work my way forward towards the camera. And after each truck, I evaluated the quality of light that I wanted to put on a particular truck and so forth. And towards the end, I realized I skipped a spot and I had to go back. And I did this all in one shot.
So we lead a lot of workshops, and this kind of shows that we're pretty eclectic. If you go onto our website, you see that we have a portrait studio. We own a whole bunch of frogs. We do landscape photography. We do animal photography, a lot of night photography. You'll even see a doorknob in there that looks like a face. So we do something called pareidoia, where you can go around. So let's say you show up at a national park and it's closed. What do? We're going to still find a really good shot by taking you to a junkyard, and we're going to have just as much fun in the junkyard as we're going to have as if we could get into whatever beautiful national park. So this kind of represents us pretty well in that you can see we have our hands in a little bit of everything. And we also have a portrait studio, and we teach workshops for photography and Photoshop and things like that there as well.
And that's how they got their Olympus equipment, was by taking people to junkyards in the middle of the night. So,
so focus stacking was something before I was an Olympus user that I kind of always was enamored with. I would take a few pictures and get the macro rail out, and then they would just sit in my computer, and every once in a while I'd have a little free time and play with it. But this shot slide really shows what you can do with focus stacking in camera. So the left picture shows, wide open, the whole flower isn't in focus, but the background's really beautiful. And we get asked the question a lot when we show at a presentation, and they say, well, why not just stop down to f/22? Well, you could do that, but now your background sucks. So what focus stacking in camera does is it basically takes a picture, refocuses, moves, takes a picture, refocuses, and moves, and you get this beautiful image that's completely in focus, whether it's a landscape, whether it is a bug, whether it's a flower, and then you get a beautiful background with it. So we do a lot of, showing people how they can take the best pictures possible, whether they're using Olympus camera and lenses or not. But with the Olympus technology, it kind of sells itself, because you show people, hey, I can stack stars in camera, I can do live time in camera, I can focus stack in camera, and you don't have to hard sell anything, because the technology is just amazing and it kind of wows people. So we did get a question of, can you focus stack with the Mark V? Yes, you can. So we do. I own a EM5 Mark III. I assume that's what that means by that. And yes, you can do that with that camera as well.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. And next up is the very dignified Josef Mark Photography. We like to look at his photos, because, as you're going to see, for those of us that can't photograph people, he shows you how it's done.
Well, I guess that's right. I guess about 98% of my photographs have people in them. I switched to the Olympus camera system full time, I think, when the EM1 Mark II came out. So I was that 3 years or 4 years ago. I don't know, it was a while back. I really, it's the simple stuff for me. The portability of the system, the vari-angle screen, the being able to see through the camera, the exposure you're about to make. Those were the really huge advantages that for me in the Olympus camera system for shooting weddings. This one is a great example. I was watching this. They got married off to the left, and I was watching the sunset go down to the right. And if you guys are, especially if you're in nature and wildlife photography, you guys know how fast this goes, right? So I'm like, dear God, please let them get done with the ceremony in time to make a photograph. And this was made 10 seconds after they got married. And thankfully, because, I had the camera on me and I could see the exposure through the camera. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't waiting to make this kind of picture. And that's what I love about the most. This is a portrait made here in Dallas, Texas, where I've been shooting weddings for the last 18 years. And this Millennium Falcon room is a pretty famous one here. This one, you'll notice, was taken with a camera above my head. And, precise framing and focus when the camera's not up to your eye is a huge win for weddings and portraits and event photography. And this last one here is actually a family portrait. I have a pretty thriving business here shooting families. I do about 50 or 60 of them a year. And I always tell people, if you're getting into doing family portraiture, you've got to show people what they're actually buying. And a lot of the time, I want to show them that these cameras can produce these beautiful wall portraits. And wall portraits is really what I want to sell to people. And so instead of just showing the images by themselves, I like to show them in the environment in which they'll actually be. And so this is an example of that. And again, this is just kids in the studio playing around, doing some double exposure work. And like I said, I love the speed. I love the quickness of using the camera. I use it in the studio. I use it on location. And it's just a brilliant tool.
All right. Thank you, sir. And next up, we have Stan Foxworthy. And he has got some very snazzy looking photos he wants to share with you.
Oh, that knucklehead. Yeah, I'm Stan Foxworthy with Foxworthy Studios. I started my career in 1976 as a photojournalist, and I've been a professional photographer ever since. What I love about what I use, and I can use anything, and I've used everything from 8x10 cameras to medium format, you name it. And I like the fact that I can just create and I don't have to worry about it, and everything turns out exactly the way I want it to look. Plays well with lighting. This was actually a 6-light photo shoot for a CEO of 4 companies. And this was actually also in Men's Journal magazine. It just makes it so easy. And at my age, I don't want to have to manual focus anymore. I don't want to have to worry about it. And doggone it, the stuff works beautifully. And sometimes I do something off the cuff with this is a comedian here in Charleston, South Carolina. We had to do something just a little bit different. The files are beautiful. I do theatrical portraiture. I specialize also in motorsports anything for advertising, marketing, commercial, and we also have Cunning Fox Photo Education, where we put on workshops around the country as well as photo talks. This is part of a project we're doing down in Havana. We're doing it in Havana and Vinales in Cuba for their 500th anniversary. I was down there in December for. So again, I'm hand holding it 1/8 of a second. It looks beautiful. Motorsports. This has got to be one of the easiest setups to use for motorsports for panning. The logos, on the EM1X, it focuses on the helmet. It knows what a car looks like. The autofocus is phenomenal. As I said, I'm tired of manually focusing anymore. And for my clients, like Michelin and others, they want to see their logo. It doesn't matter what everything else is going. If you can't get a sharp shot of the car and the logo, they're not going to.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to head on next. We have Steve and Faith Hutchinson with their. Oh, sorry. We got a little audio, I think. Yeah. Steve and Faith Hutchinson are with our photo tribe.
Hello.
Steve and Faith, tell us a little bit about yourself. Oh, King Bay. I don't know if their audio is working, guys. King Bay, verify for me. Steve and Faith, you there? Well, I'll show you some of their pictures. Their website is Our Photo Tribe. You can see right there, they live in Florida. They do a lot of weekend type workshops, single day training. They work in a camera store in Florida. Hopefully they'll be able to hop in here in a minute and be able to share. But here's a few of their images, which are really cool. Got the sax player. And then they took advantage of, as several others have mentioned, of the live composite feature in the Olympus cameras. Here's one of their shots. And then here's a really nice butterfly shot. Are you guys there yet? Oh, that's too bad. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we can get their audio back up for you here in a minute. But again, ourphototribe.com, and you can go and learn a little bit more about Steve and Faith, and hopefully they'll be able to jump in here in a minute. And as I said, my name is Lee Hoy. I am leehoyphotography.com. And I'm a wildlife, landscape, night sky, and macro photographer based out near Big Bend National Park in West Texas. I also get to lead photography workshops for Wildside Nature Tours. And Rob and I, who you'll meet here in a second, actually got to team up on our first one here in the Amazon, which was really cool. Yellowstone in winter. I love macro, getting up close to wildlife. And then, of course, my home area of Big Bend National Park. So that's my 4 photos there. Rob, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about what I don't know about you?
I don't know what that is at this point. Just a quick note, too. If some of you guys know, there's a question. Rudy wants to know if you can focus stack with the EM10 Mark II, and I haven't used that machine. So if anybody has experience with the EM10 and knows about focus stacking, jump on the Q&A and let them know. Yeah, my name's Rob Knight, and I've been teaching photography for about 12 years now, and using Micro Four Thirds cameras for 9 of those years. And the selection of images that I sent to Lee are ones that I basically couldn't have done unless I used an Olympus camera to make them. This shot in particular, Lee mentioned our trip to Peru in February along the Amazon River. And this is a handheld high-res shot with the EM1 Mark III. And having the flexibility to create that high resolution shot, great lenses like the 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8 Pro, and that kind of thing. That makes a shot like this. You know, we're walking on these rickety catwalks along this pond in sort of the middle of nowhere. And with a bigger system, if I had to set up a tripod and all that stuff, this shot wouldn't happen. So, you know, I love the flexibility of the smaller gear to begin with, not to mention the high quality of the images. Oh boy, so I lead workshops in Costa Rica. I've been doing that for the last 11 years. And one of the things that I love, everybody's mentioned the creativity of that the electronic viewfinder affords and the small size. Well, this is a great example of that. When my guide got a phone call and his eyes lit up that there was a puma in Carrera National Park, we just grabbed our gear and went. And I can hustle myself into the forest and get into almost any position with what is the equivalent of a 1200 millimeter lens. And the image stabilization works so well, I don't have to worry about a tripod, and I can get what could be once in a lifetime shots like this. And I mean, that's the full frame. That's you can still skip it, but without having to crop in, having that 1200 millimeter effective range and a lens that's basically the size of a 70 to 200 is fantastic. So this is another shot that I wouldn't even have considered making without the Olympus system. And this is the live composite. And a couple of people, we've seen some photos from the live composite so far, but this shot, we were on the boat again in Peru, and our guide was acting as the headlight and the wildlife spotter for us. And so I just opened the shutter with the live composite mode to see what it would look like. And I got several amazing shots. This is the one that came out the best, but I love having that technology built in to just be creative and play around and just kind of see what happens in a way that I mean, I guess I could have made this with a series of 8 or 10 shots at long exposures and then blended them in Photoshop, but that wouldn't even have crossed my mind if I couldn't have done it in the camera. This is another one in Peru. To me, this speaks to the sharpness of the Olympus system, the ease of use. It's not some big thing that I have to set up. I can grab the nature shots. I can get this is almost like travel photography with a monkey in it. This guy he seemed like he really wanted to show us the main lodge that was decaying into the jungle, but he kept kind of coming over to us and then going and looking over his shoulder like, come on, let's check it out. It's pretty cool. But
all right. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.
All right. Jamie McDonald, jmacdonaldphoto.com there. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jamie.
Sure thing. First, just want to say thanks for assembling this panel. It's probably a pretty good idea or a pretty good opportunity for people who either aren't familiar with the Olympus system to get to hear more about what the system provides, or for those that are in attendance that are Olympus users, it's a good way for them to get to know who their resources are moving forward, I guess, with their Olympus equipment, because I think we're all probably pretty active on social media. I know I field questions on and off all day long, and I'm sure you guys do too as well. So again, thanks for hosting this, Lee. Jamie McDonald, live here in Michigan. I've been shooting pretty much only Olympus cameras ever since day one. I got my first camera in 2007. It was an Olympus DSLR. And once I saw the original OMD EM5 announced, I pitched all my DSLR equipment and jumped right into mirrorless and haven't looked back since. I've been a member of the Olympus Visionary program and other programs that Olympus has had for like the last 8 years now. Also a podcast founder of the podcast Mirrorless Minutes, which has been running for about 6 years. About 3 years ago, started doing workshops as well. So don't do a lot of workshops every year. Not like you guys. I actually have like a 9 to 5 day job in marketing. And so I just took my passion for photography and moved it out into starting to teach people photography. My typical genres are kind of tough to describe, but I pretty much tell people if it's outside of my front door, it's fair game. So it's everything from weather, nature photography, macro, landscapes, you name it. I've even been known to, as one of those, I think previous images shown, dive into abandoned buildings in Detroit and other places throughout the country to do a little urban exploration as well. I won't spend a lot of time right now talking about the Olympus equipment. I think you guys have covered it like super well as far as the capabilities, and a lot of the imagery that you're showing here now is possible because of that, like this live composite shot along the shores of Lake Michigan. What you're looking at is about a 30-minute exposure done with live composite. Typically in the past, this was, you can see by the light on the right-hand side of the frame, this was started prior to sunset. So, you can't really run a long exposure just before sunset for a half hour without blowing everything out. So you got to love what live composite provides as far as opportunities go. Like I said, I shoot a lot of outdoor stuff. So using things like live composite come in really handy for storm chasing and fireworks, as well as astrophotography and light trails and things like that.
Great. All right. Thanks, Jamie. Next up, they weren't able to join us because they live out in a very remote area and they don't have very strong internet service. But we have Joe and Marianne McDonald, who've been in wildlife photography for over 30 years. They do workshops all over the world. Here's a beautiful shot from South Texas of a painted bunny. Here's a nice Jaguar from South America. They've got a cool little robber fly here, getting in my realm, what I like to do. And then they got this really nice Java bear, but they have been going all over the world. You can see their website that we had up there, and they do all kinds of workshops, great folks, and very long-time photographers, but unfortunately weren't able to join us this evening. So next up, I want to introduce John and Lisa Merrill. They are Merrill Images, and they have graciously donated a complete Olympus package to give away at the end of this. I don't know how they, no, I'm teasing. There's no big Olympus package at the end, but here, let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves.
Hi, we'll both say a little bit, just thrilled to be here tonight. Thanks, Lee, and the talent that I'm loving seeing. We didn't know which images we'd each contribute, so this is a treat for us as well. And I also will just acknowledge everyone has their how they get to Olympus story. And for me, it had to do with wrist and forearm issues, seriously not enjoying photography with the gear we'd used for 2 decades. But the fun factor and some of the stuff I couldn't have dreamed of when we switched 5 years ago is echoing what all of these other photographers, from frogs to city lights to abandoned places. We have a gamut, and John and I love to do travel and cultural photography, take small groups to places like Cuba, Vietnam, Ladakh. We've postponed all of our tours, and we'll hope that travel becomes safe in the next year, 2021, and doing much more regional day workshops and weekends here in the Pacific Northwest. So thanks for having us, and we can look at some images. There you go.
Yeah. So this is a shot from Vietnam. One of the wonderful things about the tours we take is there's a lot of serendipity going on. We were on the streets of Hanoi late at night and ran into this street performance, and we're able to use the lights that were on this stage to our advantage. You can see that even created some eye shine in this actor. And one of the things that we often do is we find a great background and we wait for something to move in front of it, and that was the case here. This is another. So this is in Cuba. We love to go to Cuba too, and we've gone there 5 times now, leading tours and on our own. And it's a wonderful place, wonderful people. Can't wait to get back there. And this is a wide-angle shot from the inside of a Coco taxi that kind of creates a frame, and this just shows you how colorful and full of life Cuban streets are.
Yeah, and we give a lot of thought to how we travel, and as travel photographers, we shoot a variety of architecture, lots of people, but you're walking for miles when it is an urban day or different times. So that Coco taxi is a hoot because we break into little groups of 2, and you get through the narrow streets with your camera. People are friendly and receptive, but it's kind of an interesting way to do photography and a lot of fun when you're tired to take an hour tour in these tiny little things and, also take each other. But another Cuba shot here is the use of panning, which we love to do ourselves, and we love to help others master it. It is requires some practice and patience, but to move your camera along with your subject and fuzz out a background with a slow shutter is great. And we have in our cameras and other systems where you can set a group of settings to do this well, and that would be a rapid burst, low shutter speed, and continuous focus. And it's really fun we do it in Seattle. We practice on the neighbors with their scooters and bikes, but we think it's a fun technique to use to tell stories, especially because life does have a lot of motion to it.
Yeah, we've been doing this for years, and the stabilization system and the Olympus cameras and the autofocus make it a lot easier than it used to be. I'll tell you, it's really great.
Awesome.
And in
Thanks,
street
Jack.
photography, the last thing I'll say is using live view and being able to tilt it and see it lets you see what's coming. And it's been interesting to experiment panning with live view, sometimes with the screen articulated. So thanks for having us, and we'll see who's next.
All right. Well, Eric's internet is not playing nice this evening. So we have got some of his photos. You can see his website there. Eric leads workshops as well for Josef Vano's photo safaris to exotic, wonderful destinations. Beautiful shots of some puffins that he sent in, and this hooded merganser, which is just a gorgeous shot that he sent in as well. He's got this nice close-up, intimate portrait of a bear. It makes you almost want to pet him, doesn't it? And then he sent in a really beautiful Rufus hummingbird. So Eric's got some spectacular work. Great guy. He's been with Josef Vanos for a very long time, and unfortunately couldn't be a part of us tonight. But if you go out and look at his website, you'll definitely see some spectacular work if you're thinking about going to some of those destinations. Very soft-spoken, but very extremely knowledgeable photographer. So shame that his internet wasn't cooperating tonight. Next up, we have Victor Rodriguez, photos by Victor. And as someone who doesn't do portrait or people, all of our folks that are educators that do just do spectacular work, and it makes me think about how to make my photography better. So Victor's I don't know if his video is going to cooperate tonight, but his audio should be. So Victor, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Victor Rodriguez. I'm from Photography by Victor. I also just tossed my website in the chat. I kind of got my start with Olympus back in 2009, I want to say. It was actually through the college, the university I was attending at the time, University of the Arts. They wanted to do a launch thing with students. And I was involved with that. They called me back to do a few things. And then from there, my first camera was with Olympus was the E30 when they introduced all the art filters and whatnot. Since then, I've been using Olympus to shoot pretty much all my fashion portraits. I shoot product and food as well, as also kind of more black and white fine art stuff. And occasionally I do cityscapes with my friends just to kind of kill time when I have free time. I don't really do workshops, but I teach at Rowan College in New Jersey. So I teach black studio and portrait photography there.
All right. Thanks, Victor. Appreciate you sharing. Next up this evening, we have Matt Seuss, no relation, I inquired. And he is going to tell you a little bit about what he does. You see his website over there on the left, and he's going to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about his photography.
Hey guys, thanks for everyone for joining. Lee, thank you for putting this all together, and thanks all the fellow Olympus educators for coming together and sharing what we do. I think everyone watching here kind of understands that we have a love for education, obviously, and we love sharing what we do and what we've learned and trying to help you guys out with your Olympus cameras as well. And I started with Olympus. Actually, the very first camera I purchased on my own, it was in the mid 80s. And that was an Olympus OMG film camera. And also had an Olympus stylus camera, little point and shoot. I actually still have a roll of film in it that is probably from like about 15 or 20 years ago that I have no idea what's on it. I may have to develop that one day. But like Stan, I was a photojournalist. And so I've been a professional photographer for 30 years. And I started as a photojournalist for 17 years. And I was shooting with Nikon and Canon most of the time through that. And then moved out west to do fine art landscape photography and also education. And I was most recently shooting with Sony cameras and ended up switching to Olympus just over a year ago. I got my hands on the EM1X and tried that out for a little while. And I had a 2-month loaner from Olympus, and it just blew my mind. I was just amazed at what I could do creatively. And I think Rob mentioned that he had some shots that he never could have gotten without an Olympus camera. And same thing with me. It just opened up my world of photography. And this is after being a professional now for almost 30 years at this point, where just having the Olympus cameras just opened up so many new avenues for photography for me. And I don't know, I think you're just looking at a photo of the Star Trails with a live comp on that. But yeah, actually, Lee, that next shot there, if you see me in the live video, I have a print of this that's 64 inches, something like that, behind me right now in my home studio, acrylic print. And I don't know, if people say that you can't do large prints with micro four thirds cameras, I don't know what's going on. You're just listening to the full frame hype too much. And this print is just absolutely gorgeous. So don't be afraid to be doing large prints with your Olympus cameras. And so I now specialize in landscape photography, astrophotography, and also macro photography. And this is a fun shot I did maybe about a month ago. This is a close-up of a soap bubble as it was freezing. I was fortunate to, I was in Arizona for most of the winter, but got back home to Bozeman, Montana, and we had a little bit of a cold spell a month ago, and the temperatures were in the teens, and I was out there with UV lights and my, I think this was probably with the Emswico 60 millimeter macro lens and with the Mark III camera, and just getting some really cool close-ups of the ice crystals forming on a soap bubble. And, this is something I never could have done with another camera. I also shoot wildlife now that I've been up in Montana for a number of years. This was outside of Bozeman, Montana about a year ago with the 300 f4 and probably the 1.4 teleconverter too. And I really like trying to get, not just, trying to elevate my own personal wildlife photography and trying to show them in their environment and, just really, like this photo here, I always wanted to get a photo of a bison in the snow. And again, coming back from Arizona over the winter that I spent last year, we had a nice snowfall. I knew there's some bison. And I mean, I had an idea on this image for a long time, and I was just so excited to get this, to show this bison, just some of the conditions that they have to go through in the middle of the winter. I mean, just an amazing animal. And I was lucky enough to find it under perfect conditions and have the right gear to be able to shoot out in the snow and not worry about getting cameras wet or anything like that.
All right, cool. Thanks, Matt. And last but not least is the lady who does not like computers, but has to use them for a job. And here we go, Leedra Davis Woodley, the anti-computerist. Please share.
Hey, everybody. I'm Leedra Woodley, and I am the owner of Natural Connections Photo Workshops. Basically, what I do is I take people to really awesome places. I get them to the right place at the right time of day. I help them get the shot if they need it. And overall, it's just a whole lot of fun. It's the best job ever. So I switched to Olympus about 10 minutes after I held EM5 original. Never went back to my DSLR equipment, and I have been shooting since 2012 with Olympus. And the thing I really, really like about it the most is because I'm hands-on with the workshops. Struggling with all this pro DSLR gear just doesn't work for me. I also don't like to set up and really do my own shooting during my workshops, so I now have a system where it's so light and easy that I can just take a shot here or there and not actually have to be set up. This guy here, this is one of my wildlife shots that I never used to shoot wildlife until I got Olympus system. I wasn't about to spend $12,000 on a long lens that weighed 50 pounds and all of that kind of stuff. So now I actually will shoot wildlife, and that's thanks to Olympus just existing with their mirrorless system. So it helps me a lot on my workshops. Plus, you're talking about being in conditions like this with this guy. The cold weather ability with these cameras is just amazing. And is there another picture, or is it stuck?
No, it's there. Your flower shot. Flower shot.
Thank you. I'm not seeing it. And so I tried to submit some images that kind of show you a sort of a variety of what I kind of do. This is the Olympus 60 macro, and I just think this is such a beautiful lens. It's absolutely amazing. It has great bokeh. It's just it's stunning, because I like to do the kind of macro stuff that is more of the soft look to everything. I don't do a lot of focus stacking or anything like that. I love my 2.8 lenses to do macro. So, that's just an example of, actually that was an example during a bad rainy day on one of my workshops. We had to pull an audible, and we ended up at a gardens. So I got that from rain. And then this guy here, this is actually one of my favorite shots that ever has come out of arches for me anyway. It's really amazing. And this is actually an HDR shot that we had really great sky, but we had a lot of shadow of parts of the monument there. And HDR just really, really works. I do a lot of HDR work with this camera. And I do a lot of handheld. This was probably set up on a tripod, but I've actually been doing more and more handheld work as these cameras have evolved. The image stabilization system has just gotten so much better, and you will see me doing a lot of handheld work with HDR. And again, that's one of those things that's not possible without Olympus cameras, at least for me. So I'm going to actually put up, I think I just put up my website on the chat. And yeah, I'd love to see any of y'all if you have questions about workshops.
All right, guys, I'm going to now let you get to know these folks a little bit more. I've created some questions. They have not seen them. They can verify that. And I'm going to skip around and ask some questions of our different educators. And so to start first, Mr. Rob Nye, what you may not know is Rob was a former tattoo artist. So Rob, how does your past life as a tattoo artist, how has it informed and influenced your photography?
Well, I think Leedra's shot from Arches is integral to my answer.
Let's jump back in.
No, well, I always say that anything you learn about art helps every bit of art that you do. So spending 25 years as a full-time, basically commercial artist, just using different tools than a lot of people use, that helps, whether it's talking about color relationships, whether it's talking about composition. We photographers didn't invent composition, right? So all of that goes into whether you're designing a tattoo or designing a web page or, just making a painting or making a photograph. That I think the sort of knack that I have for composition, one of the reasons I got into photography in the first place 20 years ago was because I was traveling for tattoo conventions and taking pictures as where I went. So I realized that I remember seeing a calendar that came to the tattoo shop, as a matter of fact, and I kind of freaked out because I was like, where did they get my photo from Lake Tahoe? And the guys in the shop were like, that's not your. I'm like, dude. And I pulled out the picture, and I was standing in exactly the same place. Had composed the frame exactly like this professional photograph. I'm like, well, maybe that's something I should look into. And so that, like I said, just the knack for visually organizing things, I think came from my art background for sure.